The cold wind rushed through Hartwell Ridge like it was searching for something lost in time. Snow clung to the fences and rooftops, turning the old auction barn into a quiet gray shadow against the winter morning. Caleb Mercer stepped out of his pickup, boots sinking into the thin layer of ice that cracked beneath him. He pulled his worn collar higher around his neck. For years he had stayed away from crowds, away from memories that hurt more than any winter storm. But something had pulled him here today. Something he did not understand. He did not plan on coming to the county rescue auction. Most days he spent fixing fences for nearby ranchers and drinking his coffee alone while the mountains faded into dusk. But that morning, the old radio on his kitchen counter mentioned a group of horses taken from abandoned land. Something in that simple announcement tugged at him harder than he expected. It felt like a quiet knock on a door he had not opened in 10 years. As he walked toward the holding pens, the smell of cold iron and old hay filled the air. Horses stood behind railings, each one carrying its own history and scars and tired eyes. Caleb glanced over them without much interest. He was not looking for anything. Not today. Then he froze. A thin, dust-covered gelding stepped into the auction ring. Its ribs showed through its dull coat. Its hooves struck the ground unevenly. But Caleb did not see weakness. He saw a ghost. The horse lifted its head, and a pale, ash-colored streak along its neck caught the light. Caleb's heart slammed inside his chest. His breath stopped halfway. Ashfall, he whispered. He had not spoken that name in a decade. Saying it now felt like pulling sunlight out of a grave. The world around him narrowed. The crowd mumbled. Traders whispered prices, but he heard none of it. He saw only the tired gelding struggling to stand, the same horse he raised from a wild young colt, the same horse he lost in the great mountain flood that took his barn, his land, and almost his life. The auctioneer rattled off numbers in a fast chant, his voice echoing off the cold wooden walls. Caleb did not move. He stared at the horse's uneven step, the faint scar on its left shoulder, a teardrop-shaped mark only he would recognize. His knees weakened. A man beside him shrugged. Poor thing's not worth the feet it'll take. Caleb ignored him. He had not believed in miracles for years, but this one stood in front of him, shaking from winter and fear. Without realizing he was moving, Caleb stepped forward. The crowd shifted as he pushed through them and reached the metal fence. "That's my horse," he said, his voice rough from years of silence. "That's Ashfall." The barn went still. A few chuckled under their breath. Someone whispered, "Old man's crazy." The auctioneer frowned. "Sir, you need papers if you're making your claim." "Let me get close to him," Caleb said. "Give me 2 minutes." "2 minutes won't get you proof," someone called out. "No," Caleb said softly, eyes locked on the gelding. "But it might show the truth." The moment he spoke, Ashfall's ears twitched. The horse turned his head toward Caleb, slow but certain. It was small, barely a movement. Yet it hit Caleb like thunder. Horses forget many things. But not everything. Not everyone. The auctioneer sighed and nodded to the handler. Caleb stepped into the ring. The crowd leaned in, silent now, waiting to see what the old cowboy would do. Caleb lifted his hand but did not touch the horse. He stood still, breathing slow and steady. 3 calm breaths, a ritual he and Ashfall used in storms long ago. A breath for trust, a breath for calm, a breath for home. The gelding's trembling eased. Then, in front of every stunned eye in the barn, Ashfall took 1 step toward Caleb. Then another. The horse pressed his muzzle against Caleb's open hand, breathing warm air across his skin. A woman gasped. A rancher muttered, "I've never seen anything like that." Caleb closed his eyes, holding back the tremble in his shoulders. It was him. It truly was him. But before the quiet could settle, a harsh voice echoed through the barn. "That horse is mine." A man pushed through the crowd. Owen Briggs, red-faced and angry. "I bought him fair and legal. You think a trick like that changes anything?" Quote. The tension in the room snapped tight. Ashfall took a frightened step back. Caleb lifted his hand gently. "I'm not here to fight you," he said. "I'm here because he remembers me." "Memory doesn't win in court," Briggs snapped. "Paperwork does." Sheriff Hollis stepped between them. "That's enough. This will be handled properly." The auctioneer slammed his gavel down. "Horse goes into county custody until the court decides." Ashfall jumped at the sound, and Caleb steadied him again with one slow breath. The crowd buzzed with disbelief as people began to leave. Briggs stormed out. The sheriff guided Caleb outside. "This isn't over," Hollis said. Caleb looked back at Ashfall, who stood at the gate, watching him with deep, aching eyes. "No," Caleb whispered. "It's just beginning." The county rescue barn felt colder than the winter wind outside. Sheriff Hollis walked ahead with his clipboard, while Caleb followed, boots echoing across the concrete floor. Ashfall waited in a small holding pen, a thin line of afternoon sunlight stretching across his back like a fading ember. When the gelding lifted his head, he did not look startled. He looked aware, like he had sensed Caleb coming before he stepped through the door. "We just need to evaluate your claim," Hollis said. "The judge will want details." Caleb nodded, even though his chest was tight. He knew this wasn't about paperwork. It was about proving a bond that lived deeper than ink and signatures. The handler opened the gate and stepped aside. Caleb walked into the pen but stayed 5 feet away. He didn't lift a hand. He didn't speak the horse's name. He simply breathed. One slow breath. Ashfall's ears twitched. A second breath, deeper, steady. Ashfall shifted, muscles loosening under his dull coat. A third breath, calm and familiar. The gelding's breathing matched his, slow and soft, the way it once did in storms long ago. The handler stared in disbelief. Even Sheriff Hollis stepped closer, eyes narrowing as he studied the quiet connection forming in front of him. Caleb extended his open palm, not demanding anything, only offering. Ashfall stepped forward with purpose this time, not fear. He touched his muzzle to Caleb's hand, then held it there, like he had been waiting 10 long years to do it again. A tremble ran through Caleb's fingers, but he kept still, letting the moment speak for itself. "Look at that," one handler whispered. "I've never seen a bond survive that long," another said. Caleb placed his palm along Ashfall's cheek. The gelding leaned into him with a gentle trust that silenced every doubt in the room. But the silence shattered when the barn door slammed open. Owen Briggs stormed in, face red with frustration. "Enough! That horse is mine!" Hollis raised a hand. "Briggs, calm down." "No!" Briggs snapped. "I fed him. I worked him. I paid for him. I'm not losing him because an old cowboy breathes at him." Ashfall flinched at the raised voice and stepped back. Caleb moved between the horse and the anger without thinking. His presence steadied the gelding again. "It's not a trick," Caleb said softly. "He remembers." Quote. Briggs pointed a shaking finger. "Memory doesn't win in court." "Maybe not," Sheriff Hollis replied, "but this isn't something you can fake." Briggs threw up his hands and stormed out, muttering threats. Hollis sighed, rubbing a hand over his beard. "I'll schedule the hearing," the sheriff said. "A judge will decide." Caleb nodded, though he felt the weight of the fight settling onto his shoulders. But the day was not done. When Caleb returned to the barn later that afternoon, the sun hung low over the ridge. He expected to find Ashfall alone. Instead, he saw a woman standing at the stall, one hand resting gently on the railing. Her coat was dusty from travel, and her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders. She watched Ashfall with soft eyes full of memory. Caleb approached slowly. "Can I help you?" The woman turned. "You must be Caleb Mercer." He nodded, unsure how she knew him. She stepped forward, offering her hand. "I'm Leah Carter. Sheriff Hollis told me you might be here." Caleb shook her hand cautiously. "Do we know each other?" Quote, "No," she said softly, "but I knew the horse." Caleb's breath caught. "Ashfall?" "We called him Ember." Her voice cracked just slightly. "My daughter named him." Caleb's heart thudded once hard. Leah reached into her pack, pulling out a worn photograph. She handed it to him gently. The picture showed a small girl clinging to a muddy horse in a raging storm, while the gelding stood braced above her like a shield. "This was 5 years ago," Leah said. "The blood hit Wren Hollow. Ember found my daughter in the water. He saved her life." Caleb stared at the photo, throat tightening. Ashfall looked younger in the picture, thin but alive, eyes bright with courage. "He was always like that," Caleb whispered. "Courage hidden under quiet." Leah nodded. "We sheltered him for weeks. Then a man came with paperwork saying he owned him." "Briggs," Caleb said. "Yes." "Ember didn't want to go with him, but we didn't have any proof to stop it. I've regretted it every day since." She pulled out a small flash drive. "There's video from the rescue. It's not clear, but you can see him. You can see what he did." Quote, Caleb held the flash drive gently, understanding its value. Courts liked proof. This was proof. "Why bring this to me?" he asked. "Because that horse deserves someone who sees him," she said. "Really sees him." Ashfall nudged her hand, recognizing her calm presence. Leah smiled sadly and stepped back from the stall. "You're going to win this," she said. "Not because of the law, but because the truth is choosing sides." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I'll testify if you need me." When she was gone, Caleb ran his hand over Ashfall's muzzle. The gelding lowered his head, breathing warm air against Caleb's arm. "You hear that?" Caleb whispered. "People are fighting for you, too." For the first time in years, hope didn't scare him. It felt real. The next morning, the courtroom filled with quiet tension. Ranchers, townsfolk, curious neighbors, all wanting to witness the outcome of a story they had not expected to unfold in their small town. Briggs sat stiffly beside his lawyer, piles of documents arranged neatly before them. Caleb sat across the room with Sheriff Hollis and Leah Carter at his side. He held nothing but a worn photograph of Ashfall, taken long before the flood. Judge Markham entered, firm and sharp-eyed. "We will hear testimony." Briggs's lawyer went first, presenting paperwork, receipts, vet notes, and bills of sale. Everything looked clean and official. When it was Caleb's turn, he did not raise his voice or argue. He placed the old photograph on the judge's bench. Then he spoke one simple truth. "He's family." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Markham studied Caleb for a long moment. "This case requires more than documents," she said. "We will conduct a field evaluation." Briggs exploded in frustration, but the judge shut him down with one stern look. Tomorrow they would go to the paddock. Tomorrow, the truth would show itself. The sun dipped low over Hartwell Ridge as Judge Markham stepped into the evaluation paddock, notebook in hand. The winter lights stretched long across the slushy ground, turning the whole arena into a soft gold stage. A small crowd gathered along the fence line. They weren't here for gossip anymore. They were here because something in this story had gripped their hearts. Ashfall stood quietly in the center of the arena, thin but alert. His ears flicked forward the moment Caleb arrived. On the opposite side, Owen Briggs leaned against the fence, jaw tight, shoulders tense, fear hidden under anger. Judge Markham cleared her throat. "We will begin. Mr. Briggs, you interact with the horse first." Briggs stepped into the paddock, trying to appear confident. But the air around him carried frustration, impatience, something sharp that animals sensed long before people did. He reached for Ashfall. The gelding stiffened immediately. Briggs took another step. Ashfall backed away, ears pinned, muscles tightening. Briggs tried circling the horse, speaking in a forcefully calm tone. But Ashfall shifted again, stepping farther out of reach. "He's just skittish," Briggs muttered. "He's always like that." Judge Markham made a note. Briggs tried one last time, but Ashfall turned his head sharply away, breathing hard. "That will do," Judge Markham said. Briggs stalked out of the arena, face red, anger simmering just under the surface. "Mr. Mercer," the judge said softly, "your turn." Caleb stepped into the paddock with slow, steady steps. He stopped halfway in, not reaching, not calling Ashfall's name, not pushing anything. He simply stood, quiet, present. One breath. Ashfall lifted his head. A second breath. The gelding lowered his neck, tension melting away. A third breath. Ashfall stepped toward Caleb, hooves sinking into soft ground, each step slow and sure. The crowd went silent. Caleb extended his open palm. an invitation, not a command. Ashfall brushed his muzzle against it, exhaling warmly across Caleb's skin. Then the gelding pressed his forehead to Caleb's shoulder, the same gesture he used to make when he was young and uncertain and needed comfort. A few spectators wiped their eyes. Even the judge paused her riding. Caleb walked a slow circle. Ashfall followed like he was tied to him by an invisible thread. "It's not training," Leia whispered from the fence. "It's love." He remembers. Judge Markham watched closely as Caleb ran his hand down Ashfall's neck, stopping right where the small teardrop-shaped scar rested. Without prompting, Ashfall leaned into him again, as if guiding Caleb's touch. When the judge closed her notebook, her expression softened. "Thank you," she said. "This tells me what documents cannot." The next morning came with gentle snowfall drifting over the ridge. Sheriff Hollis knocked on Caleb's cabin door, his breath fogging in the cold. Caleb opened it before he spoke. "It's done," Hollis said. "Judge Markham ruled in your favor. Ashfall is yours." Caleb's breath broke in a quiet, trembling way. He steadied himself against the doorframe. Relief didn't explode. It settled into him like warm light melting a decade of frost. "He's mine," Caleb whispered. "He's finally coming home." When they arrived at the rescue barn, only a handful of people were there. No crowd, no spectacle, just quiet understanding. Ashfall lifted his head the moment Caleb approached, ears pricking forward, eyes bright in a way that hadn't been seen in years. Caleb opened the gate. "Come on, boy," he murmured. "Let's go home." Ashfall walked into the trailer without hesitation, trusting him completely. Leia arrived just in time to place a hand on Ashfall's muzzle. Her eyes shimmered. "My daughter will be happy," she whispered. "The horse who saved her is finally where he belongs." Caleb nodded. "Tell her she can visit any time." Leia hugged him briefly but warmly, then stepped back. "Take care of him." "I will," Caleb said, "and he'll take care of me." The drive home felt different, not heavy, not lonely. Just full, like the road itself had been waiting for this moment. When they reached the cabin, Caleb opened the trailer. Ashfall stepped onto the familiar land he had once known. He lifted his head, smelling the mountain air, the pine, the earth, the memories. Caleb unclipped the lead rope. Ashfall walked toward the barn, slow at first, then steady. He stopped at the open stall door, his old stall, and lowered his head as though he had never left. Caleb leaned on the frame, eyes stinging. "You remember?" he whispered. Ashfall turned back and walked to him, pressing his forehead gently into Caleb's chest. A gesture of home. A gesture of forgiveness. A gesture of forever. The months that followed changed Caleb's life. Ashfall regained weight. His coat brightened. His eyes shined again. And each morning Caleb walked the ridge with a gelding beside him. No lead rope, no fear, just companionship. One spring morning, as the valley warmed and the snow finally melted, Caleb stood with Ashfall overlooking the land. The sunrise painted everything gold. "You're free now," Caleb said softly. Ashfall took a few steps into the open meadow. Then he turned back. He chose Caleb, not because he had to, because he wanted to. Caleb placed a hand on Ashfall's neck. "We start fresh," he whispered, and together they walked home.